And welcome everyone to this August e-Roundtable webinar. It's a pleasure to have one here. My name is Adeoju Ope Ajayi, and I'm really happy to see this number of people here. I'm a member of WIMBIZ. I'm also a member of the Associate Clubs and Roundtables Committee. Great to have everybody here. Women in Management, Business and Public Service, WIMBIZ, is a non-profit organization that has, over the last 19 years, implemented programs that inspire, empower, and advocate for greater representation of women in leadership positions in public and private sector. WIMBIZ is the first Nigerian NGO rated by the NGO Advisor and ranked for 428 worldwide. It is also the only African and Nigerian affiliate partner and representative of the International Women's Entrepreneurship Challenge, the IWEC Foundation. WIMBIZ is also a volunteer-based organization funded largely by donations and contributions by members and partners, and is a supporter for the Code of Ethics and Conduct for NGO. For more information about WIMBIZ, please visit our website on www.wimbiz.org. That is www.wimbiz.org. We would also like to thank our amazing sponsors. We have wonderful sponsors for today that sponsored the e-Roundtable webinar. They are the African Missions Global. We have Tomaville Event Center. We have Hefway, and we have Mrs. Ayono Fatai Williams, who is an associate of WIMBIZ, as you can see. Please note that at the end of this webinar, an evaluation link will be sent to you all in your email as a follow-up email. We need your feedback. Please endeavor to fill it. We want to hear your opinion about this webinar. We kindly invite our dear participants who are not WIMBIZ associates to become one today. They're amazing benefits, I assure you. And to those of us who are associates and yet to renew our memberships, kindly do so. For inquiries, you can contact via email memberships@wimbiz.org. Furthermore, please tweet and tag us on your social media using the hashtags, hashtag WIMBIZ e-Roundtable and hashtag WIMBIZ. On LinkedIn, we are Women in Management, Business and Public Service, and on Twitter, it's @WIMBIZ. Now to the business of the day. Yes, I'd like to introduce our moderator. Dr. Otive Ibuzo is the founding executive director of the African Center for Leadership, Strategy and Development, Center LSD. He was a one-time international head of campaigns of Action Aid International and the country director of Action Aid Nigeria. He was a founding and leading member of many human rights and mass democratic organizations in Nigeria in the 1980s and the 1990s. He's a member of many professional associations in Nigeria, and he also sits on the board of several organizations as well. You're very welcome, Dr. Otive. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, my co-moderator. And let me welcome everyone to this meeting. This meeting webinar is very important. It is titled The Unspoken Realities of Gender Inequality. The major concept there is gender inequality, because we all know that women are discriminated against and marginalized in all spheres of life: political, economic, social, cultural, and technological. The gender gap is real. So there is actually realities of gender inequality. 70% of those living in extreme poverty are women. only about 24% of women are in parliament globally, 23 in Africa, 6 in Nigeria. The gender dimensions of inequality is scandalous because we know that the 22 richest men in the world have more wealth than all women in Africa. In most cases, these are not spoken about. But today, we want to speak about them and we want to take action so that it will no longer be unspoken realities of gender equality, but things that we talk about and we are taking action to get them happen. Today, we have 2 leading panelists that are going to speak to us on this issue. One is Professor Oluwafunmilayo Paramalan, a professor of gender and development studies and a senior fellow at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies. The second speaker is Mrs. Jacqueline Carmenzi, Executive Secretary of the Rwandan Women's Council. We know that Rwanda has made some progress, phenomenal progress, especially in terms of women participation in politics. And we hope that Mrs. Carmenzi will be able to share some perspectives on these as we move on. Both of them will also share perspectives, about their work and how it interferes with the issue of unspoken realities of gender inequality. During this webinar, we'll be taking polls from time to time, and at the end, we'll have a chance to ask questions. In fact, we've devoted a lot of time in this webinar for questions, comments, and answers. So we shall be taking those ones at the appropriate time. So, but let's take the first poll. The first poll will look at whether you have experienced workplace gender inequality or discrimination. The questions are there. So you just vote yes or no in terms of the first poll. And there are 2 questions. The second question is, in your opinion, why is there a dearth in female representation in management and leadership positions? So just vote quickly. You have 2 minutes to vote, and then we'll look at it before we start the panel discussion. So how many people have voted? Have we all voted in the 2 polls? If a reasonable number has voted, can we see the poll results? Well, this is interesting. 53% say they have experienced discrimination, and then a greater percentage says that family responsibilities don't leave time for women to lead in organizations, and women are less likely to ask for promotion or raise. I think these issues will come up as we get along. And so the way the panel discussion is structured is that we will have our panelists try to give their introductory statements to produce to give us a guidance on the topic under discussion for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back to them later. Let me now call on the first discussant, my sister, Professor Malam, to continue the discussion. Malam, to start the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, moderator. My dear friend, Dr. Otive Ibuzo. It's Professor Fumi Paramalam, and I am absolutely delighted to be here. In particular, I am fascinated and intrigued by the topic that WIMBIZ has chosen, unspoken inequalities or unspoken realities of gender inequality. Every single one of those words is loaded. First and foremost, when you say unspoken, it means that there are so many aspects of gender inequality that women just don't speak about, and we just tend to just get on with. We just tend to get on with life without querying or questioning. And a lot of those unspoken things are the lived realities of women, and they need to be spoken about as a strategy for raising gender consciousness, not just in women, but also in the wider society. And then when you say realities because women live with these things every single day, and so much so that they are normalized. And when they become normalized, many times women don't recognize inequality or discrimination for what it really is. And when you even look at the poll, I personally was quite surprised to see that 49% of women said they'd never experienced it. But that's also, I think, a reflection of the normalization of inequality, and that many women don't even recognize inequality even when it's there. And then you talk about what expert. I've come across a situation where many people, particularly men, think that when women talk about gender inequality, or when they say they want gender equality, women are basically saying they want to be men, they want to be the same as men, but absolutely not. Saying that you want to end gender inequality and you want to strive for gender equality is not about wanting to be a man. It is about three different things that have been identified in the literature. First and foremost, gender equality is about formal equality. In other words, wanting to be treated the same under the law, wanting to be given the same access to opportunities in society. And then the second aspect of it is substantive equality, meaning you want the same outcomes, men and women having the same outcomes from policies, from interventions, from whatever. Women and men should be able to have the same benefits from these things. And then thirdly, agential equality, which means that the women should have the capacity to make strategic choices. Capacity means that, whether economically or politically, the playing field should be level. So gender equality is about equity, it's about leveling the playing field so that everybody's human capacity is able to be tapped into, to be harnessed for the right things. And I would like to start with a personal story. It's a very simple story, but it says a lot. It speaks volumes. Several years ago, when I was just starting out on my career, at a point I felt as if I needed to take a step further, and I felt, okay, I need to start attending conferences where I could network, form alliances with other scholars and professionals. And so I decided to go to our printing press to ask for a business card that I would use at the conference. And when I went to the printing press and I told a female colleague what I came to do, she laughed. And I asked, why are you laughing? She said, because the head of the printing press, who happened to be an Alaji at that time, doesn't believe that married women should have business cards because they're using the business cards to flirt. And I was astounded because this was a federal institution. This was a place that every worker was entitled to a business card, but a personal ideology of a leader or of a person in authority was there, has stopped every woman before me from getting a simple business card. going forth from that, there are issues that I'm looking forward to this interaction today, and I'm so happy for everybody who is here. I can see 210 participants, but I think that there are some critical issues that we need to agree on right from the beginning. And that is the fact that, number one, women in the workspace, talking specifically about the workspace, encounter barriers and blockages that their male counterparts may not necessarily encounter. And some of those are hidden. They are what we call structural barriers or structural determinants or structural factors. They are hidden and they are obscured. And because they are hidden, it's very often difficult to handle or tackle them because they're relatively invisible and they don't reside in a single individual because they are systemic. Those are some of the unspoken inequalities that I hope today we'll be looking into and addressing, those hidden structural systemic forms of inequality. Going back to my story just a minute ago, the hidden inequality there was simply an ideology that a person in a public office happened to hold. How do you address when somebody holds a personal bias rooted in their own religious or cultural background and they bring it to the office space? Those are some of the things that are very critical. So that's number one. The other thing that I think it's really important for us to look at is the context, the environment. No woman is an island unto herself. What is the context in which we as women operate? And I'm talking about the sociocultural context, I'm talking about the physical environment, I'm talking about the policy context, the political context, I'm talking about the economic context, even technological context. And how does that constrain or facilitate opportunities for women in the workplace? When we talk about context, we're also talking about the prevailing mindset. And I'd like to bring another story from my own personal life here about something that happened that seemed so simple, but it spoke volumes once again. So I was driving to work one day, and as I approached the junction to my office, I saw one of my male colleagues, a very junior colleague to me, along the roadside. And I stopped, I parked to pick him up. And he sat in the passenger seat. 2 minutes down the line, we got to a security checkpoint. And the soldier who was checking came up to me, my side of the door, looked across at the junior staff sitting across to me and said, "Morning, sir." Then he went around the car, came back again and said to the man who wasn't driving, "Ride on, sir." Didn't even acknowledge my presence, as if I was invisible. It is that invisibilization of women through the mindset, through the understandings, through the practices of individuals and institutions that present some of the realities that we deal with. Now, when I got home, I told my husband that, and he was like, "Oh, that's no big deal." And I thought, "Oh, it's no big deal to you because you don't live it." But you see, you can multiply that kind of response, that kind of attitude across every single workspace, across every public space. And it derives from, like I said earlier, an underlying ideological mindset. So we have to look at those things as well. And I think the third thing I'd like to say before I keep quiet and allow others to speak is the issue of gender solidarity. There's this saying, and I totally do not subscribe to this saying, but it's a saying that women are their own worst enemies. And I've heard that over and over again. And I've known men who love to say that all the time. The issue is this, because of gender inequality, the public space has been so constrained for women that they often feel compelled to compete against one another, and the famous pull her down syndrome emerges. But I think that is changing, and conversations like the one we are having today helps us to understand who the real enemy is or where the real enemy is, and very often rooted in the system. And also helps us to understand why, as women, we seriously and urgently need to build gender solidarity, whether it is in the public space or in the private space. But that conversation on how we build gender solidarity has to begin as a strategy and as a step towards promoting gender equality in the workspace. I'm looking forward to sharing more stories and more of my experience with you, not just from my personal perspective, from others. I think I'll stop there and hand over right back to the moderator. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you very much, my sister Fumi Paramala. I think he has raised a number of key issues, and I hope participants are taking note, especially the fact that there may be danger of normalizing discrimination to become a reality. And he also mentioned the common saying that women are their own enemies. Everywhere I've always tried to tackle this, that when a man kills another man to take his position, nobody says anything. It's normal. They are fighting for power. But if two women are struggling for one position, they will say women don't love themselves. I think it's a tendency to blame the victim. We're happy now that Mrs. Jacqueline Carmenzi, the Executive Secretary of the Rwandan Women Council, is now here with us. We want you, Ma, to give your introductory statements in 10 minutes.
Hello, thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you.
I hope you hear me now. Do you hear me?
We can
Yes,
hear you.
we can hear you. And just to the participants, if you have any questions, please drop it in the Q&A and we'll look at it at the appropriate time. You can go on, Mrs. Jacqueline.
All right, thank you so much, Prof. I just want to thank you so much for organizing this platform for local and international partners across the globe. We love WIMBIZ impact, and we hope it will extend our work even more across the globe. So I'm here from Rwanda, from the National Women's Council. The National Women's Council is a forum for social mobilization, capacity building, and advocacy for women here in Rwanda. And just like anywhere in the world, we look at gender equality as a way to development. And in our national strategy for development, gender equality is among the key pillars. It is a strategy for everyone. It leaves no one behind. Men, women, young, old, everyone. This is a country where we value women's contribution so much, and where we have harvested a lot from women inclusion in all walks of life. So we hope this network will help us to learn what you are doing, will help us to share what we are doing here, because we know there are very many benefits. There's a lot of profit working with people across the globe, having many partners, growing the network across has a lot of profit than struggling alone. So we believe in learning, we believe in sharing, and we are ready to share with you and learn from you. Thank you.
Been raised. Professor Paramalam, you have raised a lot of issues that there are barriers and blockages to women, structural barriers and contextual barriers. My question is, what are the pragmatic ways that we can use to address these barriers? And then for Mrs. Jacqueline Carmenzi, we know that women in politics, we have the highest percentage in Rwanda. How did you do it? so that people from other parts of the continent can learn. How can, in Nigeria, there is 6% of women in parliament. In Rwanda, there is 60-something%. How did you do it? Let's hear from Professor Param first.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Pragmatic ways. Okay, first and foremost, let me backtrack and remind us that I said that there's structural, systemic inequality, and there's also the direct forms of inequality. The structural, systemic forms of inequality are not found alone. These are, can you still hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So systemic inequality needs a concerted approach. And that's why I spoke about gender solidarity. Raising consciousness in all women from very early on in life, women and girls raising their consciousness to understand that women need to work and act together in support of one another. There is no two-way around that. It's very, very critical. But also talking about the system, in research, it has been shown that when you have a critical mass of women in decision-making positions, they begin to tilt the balance. They begin to change policies. They begin to change the direction of governance. And I think Rwanda is an excellent example. I'm so happy that we have Mrs. Jacqueline Carmenzi here, because she can tell us a little bit more about that experience. So we need to strive for affirmative action that places more women in decision-making positions so that they can begin to shift the balance. And also, when you have more women in decision-making positions, it creates a different imagery in the mindset of the populace, because they begin to role model leadership. You know very well that in our culture, talking about Nigeria, for instance, leadership is not necessarily seen. Women are not necessarily seen in the context of leadership. So leadership is seen as a male prerogative and a male preserve. But when you begin to get women to perform as leaders, then it begins to change the national mindset. Coming down to the individual level, every single woman has agency and has the capacity to make choices. And there are certain choices that I think, there are 3 choices that I think women must make. Number 1, you need to decide whether you're going to take the easy road or the honorable road. What do I mean? The easy road that is held up for women is that, oh, just give your body, just, bend over, bend the rules, allow yourself, to be used. You will get ahead. You will get that promotion. You will get that opportunity. You will get that, whatever it is. But when you take the honorable road, it might take you longer, but it's more sustainable. And it brings integrity and a wealth decision. The second decision that every woman has to make, and this one I think is so critical, is the decision to value yourself, to accept that you are as good, as competent as the guy next to you, sometimes even more competent. And that valuing of self, there are 3 pitfalls that one has to avoid. 2 pitfalls, sorry. Don't apologize for being good. Don't apologize for your competence. And then the second pitfall, because sometimes women feel the need to overcompensate because, okay, I'm in a male dominated field, and so I just have to prove myself that much. And so we try to overcompensate for that. So those 2, I don't want to take too much time, but let me just stop there to say that those 2 are very critical choices that a woman has to make. Taking the honorable way and making sure that you value yourself and you're damn good at what you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've raised key issues about the need for socialization of the girl child, but I dare to add that, even also of the male child, because we want to have gender-sensitive men and men who fight for gender equality. So let's go to Mrs. Jacqueline Kamani. How did you do it in Rwanda?
In an intentional, way of doing things, since 1995, the government of Rwanda has taken a decision to include women in all spheres of life, from being at home, in politics, in business, and it was intentional. When we were starting, it was not very easy because even women did not believe in that much. But the leadership thought no one should be left behind. So they said, we can go around, we can do better, we can do things. Personally, when I had just finished school, when I had finished senior 6, there was a wave to call women into sciences, to science subjects and technology, to tell them it is possible, to call them to go into leadership. And actually, when they were starting during 1995, they were calling people to go to the parliament, and people were very hesitant. You know, they were shying away. So there was a push somehow. But now, if you can see how women are running in elections to take their candidature, to compete, to present their, you know, to present their credentials, to compete, and to participate in the national development. It began as a struggle, but it was so intentional. That's how we did it. It became, number 2, it was a plan for everyone. If it becomes a national agenda, everyone has to respect it. It's not because all of us liked it, because from a background that all of us know and share in one way or the other, it was not very easy to say a woman will lead, for example, a district or a town, or will be a minister, leaving the husband behind. So you can imagine the related challenges. But if it is a political decision, then it has to be obeyed. It has to be respected. Until up to now, people have realized that women can do just like men can do, or do even better. Why not? So we look at meritocracy. After giving the affirmative action, after investing a lot in women empowerment, in women, you know, encouragement, now we are reaping the fruits of meritocracy. We are looking at meritocracy now. Number 2, how we did it was engagement of women themselves. There was a lot of mobilization. This institution I work for, the National Women's Council, has the primary responsibility to mobilize women, to build their capacity and to advocate for them in case there is a problem. So once there was any problem, women come together. They say, no, we have to do things differently. But of course, with the backing of the leadership, we had a very good political will that supported women, that believed in us, even when we had not believed in ourselves, yes. So that gave us a very strong platform. It gave us a very strong foundation to work even harder, because we knew we had all the support. Another one that we are working on now is involvement of our male, you know, counterparts, our husbands, our brothers, our friends, our, you know, men in this fight, because they have interest. My president says, by empowering women, no one loses. They are our sisters, they are our wives, they are our children, they are everything. So who loses by empowering women? No one loses. So everyone, if the head of state says that, I don't see who else should be saying anything else. And by the way, it's sound enough, it's clear enough. No one loses by empowering women, because women are the backbones of the society, they are backbones of families, they are backbones of this country, of the country and the world. So we have taken it really to be something very, very important, very key in whatever we do, to see women come in as a critical mass. In our national strategy for transformation, women have a responsibility to drive the economy. Women are in business now. of course, we have women who are still struggling with in vulnerability in smaller businesses. Now we can imagine the effects of COVID and all that, but they are working very hard. So at this juncture, we are planning for women in business to extend, to look at the markets around, regional markets, international markets, to network and do business even better. More to that, we are looking at men as a very strong partner in this move. Men are being called upon to support women, to support their wives, and to make it a national agenda, even at workplace. Workplace should reflect realities of our homes. The problem of looking our homes, or of looking at our homes as something different, something separate, and when we come to the office, we want to be different people. It's not right, because I'm a woman, whether at home or in the office. I don't change my gender because I'm in office. So our offices should develop realities. We are advocating for it now, and we have the national ECD program, Early Childhood Development Program. We are encouraging to have ECDs where we are, where we work, in our local communities. So you take care of the children in your nearest vicinity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think you've raised a number of issues, but the one that struck me most is that Rwanda was able to achieve this through intentional, deliberate policy backed with political will.
Exactly.
Professor Paramalam, I think you should be thinking about it professorially. But in a place, in a country where there is not that intentional, deliberate policy backed up with political will, in such countries, what can we do to change the narrative? As you are thinking about that, we want to go to the second pool to look at whether people have experienced sexual harassment at workplace and how they handled it. So we're going to take this second pool. Have you experienced sexual harassment at a workplace, and how did you handle it? As we are taking that, I think that our sister Jacqueline Carmenzi has given us a lot of food for thought. I like the concept of affirmative action with meritocracy. So you start with quota, but that quota is not given to the worst, it's given to those who merit it. And as you go along, the capacity to compete will become higher. He talked about mobilizing women and building capacity. He talked about what really, interests me a lot. That is the issue of involvement of men in the fight for gender equality. I think the United Nations has even recognized this and has done a lot. And she also talked about advocacy. I'm just talking as people are voting, so that everywhere will not just be quiet. But I hope you are voting for those two questions. We'll just give you the next 30 seconds to vote so that we will look at the results. Because after the voting, we will zero in a little. The panelists will zero it a little on sexual harassment and where can women get help. I want Mrs. Jacqueline to begin to think through that. Carmenzi, where can women get help if they get sexually harassed across Africa? And also Professor Paramalam, in addition to telling us what can be done in countries where there is no political will, where can women get help? So can we get the results? Wow. From the statistics we have on Nigeria, for instance, we know that about 30%, 1/3 of women have experienced sexual harassment, but today we are getting full of 54%. And, you know, unspoken realities. 29%, majority of the people just kept quiet and did not do, they just told him off. You know, these are the realities of what we are discussing. So sexual harassment is increasing. We noticed that during this COVID-19 period, it increased globally, even including Nigeria. So, Professor Paramala, what can we do in countries without political will, without intentional, deliberate policies to involve women? What can we do to challenge the narrative? And where can women get help? Professor?
Right, very much. Really great questions. Short answer, we have to have legal reform. We have to have change in the laws. I have been advocating for the national policy on national gender policy to be not only to be reviewed, but to be legislated upon, to have legal backing. But beyond legislation, we need to work for its enforcement. So for instance, we need to make sure that the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act is domesticated across the country. Incidentally, a couple of years back, I was involved in a research to find out why it is that CEDAW was not domesticated in Nigeria. Why did the National Assembly throw out the CEDAW bill and other bills that protect the rights and dignity of women? Why has the Nigerian National Assembly consistently refused to legislate on these bills? And one of the things that I found amazing, it goes right down to what Mrs. Carmenzi was talking about, the sense that men have that they will lose something if women gain something. So the need to persuade our men folk that women empowerment is not your loss. Her gain is not your loss. And that's why I'm so happy about the he for she United Nations and Sustainable Development Goal mantra, he for she, because men need to get to understand that if women do well, they do not do worse. And that is a cultural revolution. That is a national value reorientation. And it starts from the family. It starts from religious and cultural institutions. It means we must engage with the gatekeepers of public opinion to get them to understand, to think differently about the value and the worth of male and female, to move away from the patriarchal ideology that brings about son preference. There's something else that Jacqueline said, if I may call you that I think is very, very important, and that is the need not to separate who we are in the home and in the workspace. Now, this is one of the most unspoken realities of Nigerian women in particular, where you may have a chief executive, great woman, respected in her office, but she's battered and bruised at home. She can't speak in her own home, or she's going through hell in her own home. Those are things that women need to change. And honestly, it starts from the human agency of the woman, because by the time a woman esteems herself, respects herself, she begins to set boundaries and on what she's willing to accept, whether at home or in the workspace. Now, talking about sexual harassment, again, I was intrigued at the feedback that only 54%, you may look at it as many, it's a jump from 30 to 54%. I suspect that many more women are being sexually harassed, but simply that most of us don't understand the definition of sexual harassment. Even a sexist joke is sexual harassment. Even a joke that undermines women or puts women down is sexual harassment. And I doubt whether any woman hasn't experienced that in the workspace. What can be done about it? Number one, stand up and speak out. I was one of the women who said, I didn't report. I didn't report, but I told him off. And the reason why women don't report is because the workspace is not set up to listen to women who have been sexually harassed. The workspace is set up as a boys' club, where it's his word against your word, and usually his word is taken over her word. So it's important that women band together to form solidarity groups where they can support one another through incidences of sexual harassment. Apart from the fact that women must band together and each woman must esteem herself, we need sexual harassment policies in the workspace. And this must be it must be compulsory that every office has its own sexual harassment and gender equal opportunity policy. And those policies must be closely monitored and evaluated to make sure that they are working. The third thing that I'd like to say finally is the issue of raising a new generation of boys and girls with egalitarian thinking. A boy, I remember some years ago from my own experience, one day I called my son. He was 10 years old at the time. And I said, oh, go and wash plates. And he said, oh, that's women's work. And I'm like, what? I didn't raise you to think that that's women's work. Where did you get that from? And I realized that it was because his own father did not model somebody who washed plates. Now, a woman can raise her boys all she wants to do the dishes. Once he gets married, he will stop them. If his own father, he did not watch his own father doing the dishes. So we need to have a new generation of parents who are raising boys and girls to see how mom and dad cooperate in the home to do to partner. If we are talking about equality in the workspace and partnership in the workspace, it has to begin in the home. The equality and the partnership must be modeled at home. And I know those are one of the unspoken realities that we often don't talk about. Let me stop there.
Thank you very much. Can we hear from Mrs. Jacqueline Carmenzi?
Thank you so much, Prof. Talking about sexual harassment, here in Rwanda, sexual harassment is a criminal behavior, and it's sanctioned by the law in the first place. So if you're found of that, you have to face the law, and it's not easy. But we have mechanisms in place to deal with it in case where we find sexual harassment. We have to report. We encourage residents, we encourage women and girls to stand up, to report it to the local authorities, to the leaders around. And here we have a center, a one-stop center called Isange One-Stop Center, where after being abused or harassed or sexually being assaulted, you go to the center for medical care, for psychosocial counseling if you need it, and for legal aid. It's a one-stop center. In case you have been raped, for example, in case you have been mishandled in way or the other. So this is a one-stop center. There are legal services, there are psychological services, but there are also medical services. So this is in every district, and they have brought the services down to the population. You can call anytime. You can go to access this in case you have the problem. There are hotline numbers, toll-free numbers on different institutions. Here we have it. The Gender Monitoring Office has it. The Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion has it. Rwanda Investigation Bureau and the prosecution. So in all those, you cannot just go unhandled. So we take it as a crime anyway. It's not allowed. And if you do it, then you are ready to face the law. But of course, a community, a society is always with people of all kinds. So if you take that risk, you know what awaits. There are ongoing campaigns by the National Police, by the prosecution and the Rwanda Investigation Bureau, but also what we call the National Gender Machinery. It means the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion, the National Women's Council, the Gender Monitoring Office, and the Forum of Women Parliamentarians. Those women we were talking of. So all that, we call that the National Gender Machinery. We work as a team. If there is a mobilization to conduct, we go as a team and we speak with one voice. So we partner with different stakeholders, the local NGOs, the international NGOs, religious leaders, you know, everyone on the team to, you know, to condemn sexual harassment in all its forms, all harassment in all its forms, abuse, discrimination, you know, degrading humanity. We don't agree to that. So it's also something intentional this government has taken to look at residents with dignity. No one should be deprived of their rights. No one should be abused. So it's an intentional approach to handling the community, to handling the people with dignity. It's not only to women, even to men. They also benefit these services. Women, men, young, old, everyone have got their own way of being handled.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think you raised a lot of critical issues. Professor Paramala has raised issues of legal reform, new laws, and luckily, at this moment, we are reviewing the Constitution. The Office of the Deputy Senate President is in charge of the Constitution review. So women who want to engage with that process, my office is open. We'll be able to provide opportunity for you to engage that process. But Professor Mara also talked about one very important thing, raising a new generation of boys and girls with egalitarian thinking, because gender inequality has been caused by patriarchy and society and the way people are socialized. So we must deal with it differently. And thank you, Mrs. Jacqueline Carmenzi. From what you are saying, we are getting our advocacy points for other parts of Africa, because what you are describing is completely absent in many other countries in Africa. They have a one-stop center to support women who have been abused, providing all kinds of services, including shelter, psychosocial, medical, legal, and so on, and having a national gender machinery to drive this process. Those are advocacy points for other parts of Africa. We're now going to the question and answer section. And so our panelists, you have to have your biro as we throw the questions at you and get responses. I've isolated 4 questions from the Q&A section. One is, how do we address gender-based issues early? That's how can we involve young people early? The second question is, how do we address the challenge of women support, men's, how do we address the problem of women supporting men? I think it's Ijoma Ozulumba who raised that question. And somebody also raised an issue. And I think both our panelists, as women professionals, you should be able to answer this question with practical experiences. One of the attendees is a PhD holder with 2 little children, and is struggling to balance time and build skills. His spouse is very supportive of her career, but not support getting help. So how can she manage? I'm sure there are many of our attendees, over 260 people, who are in similar situations. So how can they manage? And then the 4th question is, I think the issue that Jacqueline Carmenzi raised, one of the issues raised about involvement of men. So the question is, how can you involve men? If I may add, when men are the perpetrators, mostly, of these sexual abuses and beneficiaries of the patriarchal arrangement of society, how do we involve men? Yeah, maybe Paramalam can go first, and then we'll come to.
Okay, so I had 3 questions. I'll start with the first one, how to address the gender-based roles early in life. And I had actually typed a response, but I would like to just mention it for everybody's benefit, that it has to do with re-socialization. socialization and re-socialization. Obviously, we know that socialization begins with the family, and I mentioned earlier about the need to raise boys and girls, engaging with them and modeling the change from the home. But beyond that, we need a review of our educational curricula. To a large extent, our educational curricula is skewed towards traditional, conventional ways of viewing men and women. Please permit me to bring a very real life story here. A friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, one day she went to her daughter's school, her 8-year-old daughter's school, and the teacher pulled her aside and said, "You really need to talk to your daughter. She was arguing with me in class today, and I had to punish her." And she asked, "What happened?" And she said, "Well, she was arguing with me that because it was a social studies class, and the woman was saying that daddy is the breadwinner and mommy is the nurturer." And the girl put up her hand and said, "Oh, sorry, but my mom also wins bread. She buys a lot of things for me." And the teacher was upset about being contradicted in the class. But the issue is that in the educational system, many of the things that our children are learning are outdated. They do not reflect the reality of modern life, and they do not support gender equality in practice. And so there is need for an overhaul of the educational curricula, what we teach children from nursery right through to university. So that's the school system. And then the other one is religion. My country, Nigeria, is an extremely religious country. And I remember when we were interviewing members of parliament, members of the National Assembly, and we were asking them, "So why did you throw out the women's bill?" They said, "Oh, you mean that I won't be able to beat my wife? Or you mean that I will have to start cooking for my wife?" Those are the things that senators, members of parliament were saying. Incredible. So it goes to show that ideology, religion, culture, tradition, we need to begin to interrogate the way our sacred books are interpreted. How is religion interpreted? To a large extent, the major religions in Nigeria, Christianity and Islam, the teaching is skewed to kind of favor male privilege and to undermine and underestimate female value and female leadership capacity. And so we need to begin to boldly, courageously interrogate those religious texts. Who do they favor? Who interpreted them? And the issue about, the next question, addressing the problem of women supporting men. Now, this is a very, very powerful aspect. And I address this from deep within my heart. I have been working in the public sector for about 32 years. And one of the things that I have found is very, very important is genuinely supporting your fellow woman. And I mean genuinely. Modeling not the decision not to be in rivalry, dangerous, harmful rivalry with other women, but letting women understand that you are genuinely supporting them and wanting their progress. I have I've tried to model that, and I have seen great benefit in helping women see that I am not your enemy, and getting women to relax, let their guard down, and realizing that when we work together, we achieve more. But there will always be that woman, and I want to say this honestly, you need to also, there will always be that woman who will not, no matter how hard you try, want to support you, who will want to align with the status quo of male privilege. Fine. When you know such women, you know how to keep them at a distance and still work. But there will always be men who will also be on your side. And I have identified people like Dr. Otivio Igbuzo, for instance. Some years back, we had my NGO, we gave him an award as a male champion. So there are men out there who do champion the women's cause. Enlist them, work with them, mobilize together with them. It's important that we do that. And then finally, the last question about this woman, and it's a case that is multiplied across Nigeria, and I dare say across Africa, of women who at home, they are carrying what we call the triple development burden. They are responsible for productive labor, reproductive labor in terms of house chores and everything, and also community development, servicing the community and their extended families. And what my response here is not an easy response. It's not a response that many women would want to hear. But it's the response that I have adopted in my own personal life and that I've taught to the women I mentor. And it is that women must set boundaries, even at home. You need to be able as a woman to state what you expect from your spouse. And many women are afraid to do that because they think, oh, I'll lose my marriage or there will be conflict. But I have discovered that when you esteem and hold yourself in highest regard, and when you say kindly and assertively, not rudely, not combatively, not aggressively, that this is what I expect and this is the help I need. I'm willing to help you. I'm willing to be there for you. I need you to be there for me in this. And this is what I need to be the best that I can be. Women have to set their own expectations and boundaries and stick to them respectfully, but decisively. There's no two way around it. And that's what has worked for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Mrs. Jacqueline Carmenzi.
So, like to talk about that boys and girls should be raised in a gender-sensitive manner. It should start from the family level. Number two, as they grow along, they should be trained. They should be made to understand that they need each other. They should complement each other. Actually, when we had just introduced gender equality in this country, somehow men became resistant. So we said it's gender equality and complementarity. So men came along. So when you talk about complementarity, he says, okay, I need support. I need somebody to, to support me so I can be complete. So we took it that way. It's gender equality, but we have also something we have added to make it complete and to see everyone represented, because they first thought somehow they were being robbed of their powers. So they became very sensitive and they became very defensive. So when they understood their role in the development agenda with somebody's hand, then they said there should be profit within this way. Of course, it's not very easy. It's not always 100%. Some will come today, others will come next year. Probably others will come in 10 years, who knows? But they look at the interest. They have interest to partner. Since this is a political decision that was taken, there is a legal framework to enforce it. There is an administrative structure, the gender machinery I talked of earlier on. And all sorts of frameworks to make it operational. Then you have to support it. So it's a way to engage society. If you want something to be sustainable, if you want to build a society that will reflect your values, we have to raise a generation that bears, that, writes, that takes up your vision. So the young people definitely have to own this. They have to make it their own agenda so that when we are no longer here, they will stage this show again. When maybe they will be talking about something else, something more advanced than we are talking of now. So number two, encouraging the support of men. I think we all talked about, my sister, Professor, talked about it big time. Men really are very good partners. When they understand the cause, they can support it very well. So it needs a bit of mobilization. You need to partner with different stakeholders. In church, churches have got a very big role to play, because if the pastor tells someone that women are just there to respect, to do everything, and men are just there like kings, it will be very hard. If he hears it from the mosque or from the church, and the cell leader or the village leader says something different, it's too bad. But here we have a religious forum. The religious forum has very strong partnership with the government. They have spokespeople, so they speak with one voice. If they have issues they want to discuss with the government, they create a platform and they say, for us, we are religious people, this is our position. So they discuss, and the government, of course, presents, a project, an agenda for everyone, because whether religious or not religious, I don't want to call it pagan or something else, whether religious or not, the government is custodian of everyone. The government takes care of everyone. So it's very, very important for the partnership of the government with different stakeholders, namely the church, the private sector. If you look at people with jobs, private sector, how do you hire people? How sensitive are you? For example, here we had a project with the World Bank of the gender seal, what we call the gender seal. The businesses here were assessed to see if they qualify. Do they have a gender equality, for example, a policy? Do they have measures in place at workplace? So that's one of the areas of certification to do anything in the private sector. So that was something very, very important. The private sector came on board, religious leaders, government. So the partnership, no government can succeed alone. You need partners to own this, to make it their agenda. Otherwise, it won't work. Looking at the third question about the PhD, someone who needed the support, I would say that there are some reproductive roles that women have. But regarding care, here we say the unpaid care work. We are doing a lot of work here to address the unpaid care work. Mm-hmm. Men and women have interest to partner, because women, for example, if you can breastfeed, you could, breastfeed. If you have facilities, you leave the breast milk in the fridge. The man, for example, is at home. At the breasting time, the man will feed the baby and he will be in the office. Or alternatively, he can support in something else. You could bear the babies, but for the care, you could share, you could partner, there's no problem. Number two, we are also working on making administrative a friendly area for children. You could have an ECD, another development center at workplace, so that the women you have in the office have a center where they take care of their children, they change, they breastfeed. You are in the space where you are free and certain that your child is safe and secure. So of course, it requires a lot of mobilization. We are doing it now here, and men have to own it as well. And administrative structures have to consider that, be it in private or government or even religious leaders. They have availed free spaces for that, for home-based ECDs. Parents themselves own it and have spaces to bring in their children. And the last one, I think, kept coming about involving men. Men have even more interest to involve women because two hands are better than one. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. These panelists and the discussions and the questions are very, very interesting. In a program like this, time is always our challenge. There are a number of questions, and I'm going to just read out the questions, and I want to plead with the panelists to give me one paragraph answer, and not so that we can really address as many concerns and as many questions as possible. I have 8 questions here.
Wow.
Number 1, how do you ensure that policies surrounding gender inequality and sexual harassment at the workplace are enforcement? There are already laws and policies. How can they be enforced? That is from Chineye Onwara. The second question is, incest is increasing Give the example of Lagos and environment. How can we raise healthy children for tomorrow in this midst of increasing incest? That is from Doshima Bahabo. The third question is, what is the panelist view of rebuttal of a woman's view? What the questionnaire called the mansplaining, the subtle exclusion in networking. I think Professor Paramalan raised it earlier that in an organization, they don't want to give them complimentary cards so that they don't network. When a woman's view is always reported and seen as if it's not important. That question is from Rolake Akinkube Filani. And this question is specifically to Professor Fumi Paramana. How can people cultivate mentality shift, especially for people in rural areas and even in urban areas? How can they shift that mentality? What you talked about, this raising new generation of boys and girls, even those who are here, how can there be a shift, a new notion in my own language of femininity and masculinity? And then the fifth one is, how do we assess mentors as women? How can women have mentors? That's from Hawa Aji. And then the sixth question is, how do we address issue of women in higher position being aggressive to fellow women? You know, I don't know whether we can address that too, because men in higher position are more aggressive to fellow men, especially to poor men. You know, many men, there are some men, they have never, even before COVID-19, they have never shaken hands with their driver. You know, just to shake hands with driver can never happen. So I think it's human nature, it's a question of class and power. Number 7, in Rwanda, and so this is to Jacqueline, are there anti-gender voices? How are the women winning? You know, for Mrs. Jacqueline Carmenzi, for us from other countries, the stories from Rwanda is too good to be true. So are there people who are against women? How are you winning? How is it that the whole of Rwanda society appear to be gender friendly? And then the final question, how can we coordinate women groups to come together? Just one-liner answers, because we are running out of time. Let me start this time with Jacqueline Carmenzi.
Thank you so much. I think it will be very hard, but I'll try my best. First of all, be it at the strategic level, I think we need to have the leadership take a lead. The leadership has to own this agenda, first of all. If you have the leadership, own it, the planning processes, the administrative processes to enforce it, and the legal to take actions, then it will work. The families have to own it, because people are raised in families. Our background is very, very important. Number 3, we were talking of how women can encourage others. Women, we need to have wings that mobilize women on large scale. For example, here we have the National Women's Council. You could have the Nigerian Women's Council or something similar to that, to mobilize these women, to give them capacity and to advocate if there is any problem. I think it's a very good model if they have a forum to meet and discuss. And it has to reach out to the critical mass, because this agenda needs to be a global agenda. Going to the end, the paradigm shift you are talking about will be brought by a combination of the leadership, of the families, and other partners that we have, be it local, international NGOs, religious people, private sector. Everyone has to own this. So in Rwanda, how do we become gender sensitive? it's been a journey and we are still struggling like any other. So we haven't reached where we want to be. And lastly, we coordinate better. We have understood that women empowerment is not women's business. It's everybody's business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's hear from Professor Fumi Paramala.
First, I want to endorse every single thing that Jacqueline said, because that's just absolutely correct. In addition to what she said, for the first question about how policies can get enforced, policies and laws, it's important that we form networks and coalitions to push and to say no to anything besides their enforcement. In the workplace, for instance, it's important that women within a particular organization come together to say, look, we need a sexual harassment policy, or if there is one in place, we need to make sure that this is enforced, and they monitor and form an accountability group to ensure that comes to pass. And then in the other question about incest, permit me to add to incest the issue of marital rape. Yes, I said it, marital rape. There are women who come to the office in the morning, they've been raped, violently raped in different ways, and I have met some of them. In the work I do on gender-based violence, I have met many of such. So we have to look at the two. Incest is on the rise, marital rape, and various forms of sexual and gender-based violence. What do we do about them? Number one, break the silence, stop the cover-up. Cover-up and silence enables the perpetrator, never the victim. And so we need to break that silence and support anti-gender-based violence causes and organizations. Rally around them, be part of them, sign up to be part of that, of the movement that is against incest and gender-based violence. Then on the issue of the subtle exclusion, oh my goodness, that's something that is really, really true, and one of the most powerful things I think we need to address. And one thing that I would say we need to do as women is amplify the voices of your fellow women. It starts with us ourselves amplifying our own voices. In your office, amplify the voice of your fellow woman. Make it a point never to be a woman who pulls her fellow woman down, no matter what the temptation is. Don't join the boys' club to run her down. Amplify the contributions and the voices of your fellow women in the workspace. And then in terms of how do we get to change mindset, whether it is in the rural areas or the urban areas, and my simple answer to that is be a successful woman, be an outstanding woman, go back into your community, into communities, make a difference, stand out, so people can say, wow, that's a woman who's different. That's a woman. So if this woman can be like that, maybe my daughter can be like that. I've met people who said, you know what? It's because of the woman I saw that made me send my daughter to school, that made me say, okay, my daughter can go from primary to secondary school. So be a successful woman. And then, on the issue of how do we get women to network? It's through amazing roundtables and opportunities like this one. And I congratulate WIMBIZ for putting this together, because this is how it all begins. We begin to realize that we have a common agenda and we need to work together. So let's do that at small fora and big fora like this. How do we address women in high positions who are aggressive? Somebody said one day to me, said, why do we allow men? Women are human. Women are also human. So if she just doesn't like your face, so what? She doesn't like your face, move on, get a life. The other thing is this: let's not accept double standards. When men are decisive, when men are firm, when men are go-getters, we applaud them. They have leadership skills. When women have the same skills or the same things, we say that they are aggressive. I am not saying that this particular one is talking about such women, but if you do find a woman who's aggressive, and I remember one woman that I related with several years back, and she was very hostile, and I wondered why. And I decided to just move close to her. Against all odds, she would frown, she was higher than me, but I just moved close to her, became her friend. And when I began to hear her story, I realized that she was going through hell at home. And we became friends, and I began to, help her through.
Aggression.
I think finally that's all I'll say, and thank you very much for this outing. I'm so excited to be here, and I look forward to many more such opportunities.
Thank you very much. If we were in a physical meeting, I will have asked all the participants, over 200 participants, to clap for our panelists. I think you've done really, really a wonderful job. You've raised a lot of issues. You clarify the concept of gender equality. That is not to be the same as men, but it's a question of same access and opportunities, same outcome and capacity to make choices. You've identified that there are a lot of barriers, structural barriers and contextual barriers that is hampering women, whether in business, whether in politics, and even at home or in the workplace. But more importantly, you've argued quite clearly, outlined what needs to be done. Number one is that there is the need to improve consciousness of both men and women. Number two is to build a critical mass of women that are advocating for change. Number three is to advocate for affirmative action where it has not happened, like in Rwanda, to have women in leadership positions. Number four, very important, is for women to value themselves and be able to push for what they believe in, even at home. Number five is to change the educational curriculum. I remember my daughter when she was in primary school, they gave her tests, she passed all the questions except one. The one she failed is who cooked the food at home? And when they asked her, she said, Sister Ife, which is our younger sister who was living with us. And they marked it wrong. The correct answer is mother. So we need to change our curriculum. Number six is patriarchal interpretation of religion needs to be challenged. And there is, especially for places where there are gender sensitive men who are pastors, each time there is a patriarchal, because what is happening is patriarchal interpretation. Religion does not discriminate against women. Number seven is legal reform, constitutional reform. And number eight is to raise a new generation of boys and girls with egalitarian thinking. Number nine is to break the silence and speak out, especially when there is violence against women and girls. Number 10 is to generate the political will so that there will be deliberate, intentional policies to promote women in leadership positions, in management positions, and in business. Number 11 is to mobilize women and build their capacity to act. And number 12 is to involve men in the fight for gender equality. Number 13 is to advocate for one-stop center where women and girls who are abused are taken care of. And number 14 is to advocate for operationalization of a national gender machinery to address issues affecting women. We want to thank you, panelists, for your beautiful presentations. Just to let people know, the attendants, that we are going to do evaluation at the end, but at this point, let me hand over to my co-moderator, Aderoju Ope Ajayi. Aderoju, over to you.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an enlightening webinar. Thank you so much. Women empowerment is everybody's business. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Otive. Iguzo. That was an amazing moderation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Jacqueline Carmenzi. It was enlightening hearing from you. And Professor Oluwafunmilayo Paramalam, great insights. Thank you so, so much. We appreciate every single one of you. To all participants, please remember an evaluation link will be sent to you in the follow-up email. Please endeavor to fill it, and we want to hear your opinion about this webinar. We do need your feedback. It is very important. Once again, we would like to appreciate our sponsors. Without you, we wouldn't have had this e-Roundtable webinar for today. African Missions Global, we thank you. Tomerville Event Center, thank you very, very much. Halfway, we thank you very much for your sponsorship. And last but not the least, Mrs. Ayono Fatai Williams, a WIMBIZ associate, thank you very, very much for your sponsorship. We really, really appreciate you. Furthermore, we kindly invite our dear participants who are not WIMBIZ associates to become one today. Join us, become a WIMBIZ associate. For inquiries, please contact us via email, membership@wimbiz.org. You can see it displayed on your screen. And for to those associates who are yet to renew their memberships, kindly do so. You can also reach for any inquiries via email, memberships@wimbiz.org. We do hope that you enjoyed the session. We're looking forward to having you all for another session of the e-Roundtable next month. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much to our esteemed moderator and panelists, and wish you a wonderful evening and goodbye.
Bye.